because it kind of speaks to the challenge the district is up against sometimes when we're talking about kindergarten readiness.
Right. Yeah, and it's difficult because we talk about the developmentally appropriate activities. When I taught kindergarten, I taught content. And don't get me wrong, kids were reading, most of them by the time they left kindergarten, but at the same time, they were learning socialization skills. And they were doing activities that encouraged them to learn how to get along with other people and how to express their feelings and how to deal with frustration and those kinds of things. And that kind of the pendulum swung the other way because these standards came on board and people were like, well, I don't have time to do that. You know, they don't have time to sit over there and play a game. They need to get over here and learn how to add and subtract. So it's coming back, and there's, we're getting that balance. And the social emotional learning content that we've been delivering for the last few years has really helped with that, so that people can see that there is room for both, and that not only is there room, but that it is essential that students have both. Because if you don't learn those basic self-regulation skills, then it doesn't matter how smart you are, and whether you can read and whether you can calculate, because you won't be able to communicate with others and you won't be able to work collaboratively with other people. So it's starting to come back, and we're happy about that. I'm personally happy about that. Moving into career and technical education opportunities, we have two technical colleges, Fort Myers Technical College and Cape Coral Technical College. And as we said, in order to increase the placements from those, we really need to expand them and update them. So the first one on board will be the Fort Myers campus, and that will go through an extensive remodel, a big renovation, expansion, and then moving some classrooms around so that they are in better places. For example, the automotive department will move into a larger space where they have more room to work. They're going to change they're going to be updating and looking at the career offerings and saying, are these ones that are still necessary in our community or are still viable in our community? And then the tentative start and completion dates you see there, starting this summer, and hopefully within 2 years, we'll have that one up and running. Then we move on to Cape Coral. They're going to actually be expanding, not just updating, but building new space there. Again, they'll look at those career offerings, and by 2022, they're probably going to be different than what they are right now. So they'll be revamping those as well, and that should be online in 2024. The third one that's exciting, and it's a ways off, but is putting an annex out in the East Zone. We have many students that come in from Hendry County. And so having something in the East Zone, we have a lot of students in Lehigh, but also having access to those other counties will make it much easier for them to access the services, and it'll be better for us because we'll be able to have more students there. So that one, it's considered an annex, because if we build it as an annex, then we have a lot of the permits that are already there, whereas if you build a whole new technical school, it's a huge process to put a new in. So we're not calling it the Lehigh Technical College. It is a Fort Myers annex. Then we go to our high school academies, and we really want to increase the business and community partnerships that we have there. B&I has some great partnerships. They work with students out at South Fort Myers, hire some of our students from South Fort Myers High School. We want to increase those partnerships and develop advisory committees that have community-based experts on those committees. So they are working on that this year, trying to get one for every academy at each of our high schools. And that will also encourage cross-county collaboration, so people are talking to each other about what are the best practices and where are internships needed and what are the jobs that we really need in the community. And then their next job will be to develop a method of assessing the academy, so they can look at them and say, are they effective for what we as community members need, as business leaders we need, and are they really in alignment with the needs of our workforce? Then we move into retention. So we have a lot of things going on around teacher compensation. I'm sure you've heard the governor's move to raise the base salary, which is awesome, but it needs to be raised evenly across the board, which is expensive. So, how, and if you've worked in education or government or business, you know that when the laws change, they don't always come with funding to support them. And so, really working at how can we find ways to raise salaries across the board? Because it's going to be very difficult to explain to a 10-year veteran why the first-year teacher is making more than they are.
Right. There's another thing that's going to happen. The governor spoke today, and we had a report from our lobbyist. So now it looks like money for coronavirus will come out of the money that was planned for teachers. They are talking about, they are calling it a market crash, so to speak. So they're revising their income numbers, their revenue numbers down because they're assuming there will be an economic impact from the coronavirus. So I'm really concerned.
Yeah.
Really concerned because as a district and as a school board member, I can't speak for the board. I mean, I was really hoping to see, and I really believe that the state would have gone with across the board increases. There was no way they were going to be able to do just starting teachers. And they were going to be able to figure out a way to do that. And then ultimately, we would have to find out next year whether they're going to continue or whether it's going to come back on us. Because at some point, if the state does not do this, we are going to have to, as a district, go out to taxpayers and figure this out. So anyway.
But yes, the financial impact of the virus, it just decreased travel. Is going to take quite a hit. We will take quite a hit.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Also looking at incentives to retain staff at schools designated as hard to staff. And you've heard the story before, but when you look at our schools that are hard to staff, most of them are in the East Zone. Many of our teachers who are new hires end up in those schools because they have openings, and then they get a couple of years experience and they find a school that is closer to home or doesn't have quite as challenging a population. And so it's really hard to retain those staff there. So we're looking at different types of incentives to keep them there. We also have been working on a succession plan for all the chief's positions and for those tier 3 school principal positions. And last night, the board approved a position that's an associate principal position where a current assistant principal would qualify for this job, which would be, it's a step in between. They're still an assistant, the duties of an assistant principal, but taking on more of the role of the principal for a couple of reasons. One is to allow those principals to feel comfortable that when they are ready to leave that school, they have someone ready to step right in. Also, we have some school principals who are lead principals at some of our toughest schools, and they need to have time to work with other current principals to share the practices that they're using that are being successful. So this allows someone to be there and to be the principal while the principal's away, and to receive some additional compensation for taking on those extra responsibilities. So that's one of the ways they're looking to develop those succession plans. And then the third area related to retention is working on a salary schedule for our exempt employees. If you are an administrator, you're exempt from overtime. But we have some positions where we have employees who don't want to move into an administrative position because they will make more staying in their position and earning overtime than they can moving up. And so that's, particularly when we look over in our operations department. So trying to equal that out so that people feel like they can take on those additional responsibilities and grow personally without getting hit in the pocketbook. So working on that as well. And then the last one, the proximity-based student assignment that we talked a little bit about. They've hired a consultant who right now is looking at proximity zones and looking at the big picture of how to best design these. So we're looking at where the population is now, where the growth is expected to be, and how do we make it so that we have schools that are quality schools that people have to choose from that are within a reasonable area. And then that will help with things like transportation routes. Because we want all of our schools to be equally good, so we're working on bringing the schools that are perceived to be not as high a quality up to an equal level. And then because that's going to take care of part of the proximity problem. If people say, if they're not saying, well, I'm going to drive past this school to get to that school because I don't feel that this school offers as good of an education, well, that's a problem. So when they perceive that all schools are offering an equal education, then when you have 5 choices that are fairly close to home, you're going to have evenly chosen schools, which will help in its own way. And then that will help cut cost because our transportation routes will be shorter. Right now, we have some routes, particularly if you're looking at the island schools, that are taking 2 hours to come in because it's season. And then if one of those is late because they're stuck in traffic, that puts everything else behind. So this will help our families in multiple ways. They'll feel like they have good choices close to home, and students will not be on buses for such a long amount of time.
Well, I think it's also important, it's not just educational. So some schools have before school daycare, some have after school programs.
Yeah.
So a parent will choose a school farther away because that school has after school care and they need the after school care. And so we really have to look at this all wraps back into our expanded learning time and at the same time. So yeah, I don't want to give the impression, I think many times kids travel further than they need to because a school provides something other than academics that parent needs.
Or a particular program, if it's an arts program, or yes, absolutely. In the short term for these route adjustments, they've already, before winter break, they had looked at routes and said, we have 16 students in this school that really wasn't their first choice, but because the other school was full, they're making a really long trip. Let's offer them, now we have space here, let's offer them that opportunity. And so they made some phone calls to people and said, would you like to switch schools? They looked at changing some subzone, for example, Island Coast. If you were south of Cape Coral Parkway, if you live in the Cape, that's a long way, you could still be assigned to Island Coast. So they looked at the number of students, said, we're not going to do that anymore. It's not enough students that we have to do that, and so they've changed that. So they made some small changes for right now. And then long term, they're going to be looking at the whole bigger picture, and then they're also looking at, can we use some different types of vehicles? So if we need to bring students in from Sanibel, we're not going to deny them transportation, but do we really need to send a full-size bus to Sanibel? And then try and pick up kids along the way, when we could send a smaller van out to Sanibel, send the bigger bus to pick up the kids along the way, and then you also cut out those the bridge traffic. So you might have 2 students that are really, really late, and the rest of them have gotten to school on time. So they're looking at a lot of things. They just completed a Greenbelt project around this, and it was really interesting hearing them talk about all of the different data that they were analyzing to try and figure this out.
Is there any concern, is our community diverse enough to support that? The whole busing thing started in the late 70s and early 80s.
Right.
Desegregated high schools,
Right.
or desegregated all the schools.
Right.
And Lee County is one of the last counties in the nation to meet that requirement before they lost federal and state funding. So they were busing kids from Dunbar to Cape Coral High School and vice versa to get the population ratios that they needed in order to meet the
Desegregation order, yes.
So as we go back the other way now, is there enough diversity in our community where we're not going to, those rules no longer apply anymore? They don't care what rules they have.
Well, we're no longer under the deseg order, but we don't want to go back under one either. So they are absolutely looking at that as they're looking at the subzones and making sure that, and it's not just racial balance, but they're also looking at other types of balance. So they're looking at socioeconomic balance, they're looking at even like scores on the FSA. Typically, when you have higher chosen schools, say for example, one that offers an IB program or an ACE program, you get a lot of higher level students there, which means that some of the other schools get a lot of lower level students. So they're looking at ways to balance that out so that all schools have equal opportunities and all students have equal opportunities. So they are looking at that. It's going to be tricky. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's going to be tricky to do that, but that's one of the considerations, and that's one of the things that the consultants are earning big bucks to do.
That's exactly right. That's why they were hired.
That's
Yeah.
right. All right, so questions, comments, any recommendations?
It's all good. I mean, what can you say negative? The only, as I said last time we met, I still have a passion for getting this salary thing fixed. And I still think we need to raise the bar. And as we come out of the virus thing, maybe we can get there. I thought after we got through the water fiasco, we had to do this salary thing, but now the virus has put the whammy to us.
Nobody wants to talk about anything with the virus right now.
That's right.
So
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure
Maybe
you've
by the
heard.
fall, we can re-engineer ourselves into taking this thing on.
Yeah. Well, and you've heard the discussion around whether to put the millage rate on the ballot. And it took a lot of background building and a lot of preparation to get the half-penny sales tax through. We're not ready to put that on the ballot this year. I mean, we're just not. And we've heard loud and clear from several members of the community that, you need to prove you're using that money wisely before you come and ask for anything else, because, it passed, but it barely passed. So we certainly don't want to put ourselves in a position of going out for something that we're not confident will get there, because if it didn't pass, that would put us in a really bad position to go, we'd have to wait years to go out again.
But there's something else that I think people need to understand, and it has to do with the legislature, and particularly given that almost our entire delegation turns over this year, but not so much for the federal, but certainly for the state. So historically, for decades, increases in property value funded public education. Starting in 2008, the state took that away as a way of providing tax relief. So they changed the funding model for public education. Well, once they took away funding for public education, but they didn't come up with another model. And now, in addition to that, because they've already, they're using the rollback rate, the last couple of years, they have gone past the rollback rate. So that means that they're collecting even less than they would have collected in the previous year. So when we were up in Tallahassee as a school board back in January, Kathleen Pasadomo seems open to having the conversation about how are we going to pay for public education as a state. You take away the increase in property values as a method of funding, what are you going to replace it with? I mean, that's really where we're at. And so it's not just a matter of us talking about it locally. It's a matter of saying when somebody running for election stands up and says, I'm going to cut your taxes at the state level, you say, and I want to know what services those cuts are coming from, because the problem is we're all so eager to hear that our taxes are going to be cut, and nobody wants to hear, who's paying for it.
Right.
And for all intents and purposes, health and welfare and education have been the ones that have paid for it. So I told Kathleen Pasadomo when session is over, of course we'll find out after we get through the session what's going to happen. But I said I am committed to working with her to having a serious conversation about how we open this up, how we open up this whole issue of millage, and if we're not going to use millage, increases in property value as funding for public education, and how are we going to pay for it? So anyway, that's my little soapbox.
Somewhere.
Hmm?
It's gotta come from somewhere.
It's going to come out of your state taxes, or it's going to come out of your local taxes.
I would say local impact fees, and everybody's gonna hate that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Better taxes.
I like the idea of local because I think you have more control over how you spend the money. On the other hand, that is really tough to sell as a politician. So, there you have it.
I think there's not enough parents engaged with the process too, with the actual, they're not getting involved in the elections.
Well, I also think that, and it's not disparaging them, I mean, I understand the appeal of it, but as a society, we've taken an awful lot of constituency, moved away from municipalities and local government providing these services, and people will pay $300 a month in a homeowners association fee to get the amenities and the services that they want, and then it's all about getting their property taxes lower, because that's paying for kids, and I don't have kids anymore, right? You know, I paid for that up north, and so we've shifted a lot of the stuff that used to be done by municipalities into the private sector, and it's a model that works great, but this is the impact of it overall to the community outside the gates of those type of things.
I also think it's not just parents, it's really taxpayers that need to be involved, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not only parents that should be involved in public education, it's really everybody, because it impacts everybody.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we get that message out there.
My father-in-law was complaining because his waitress wasn't counting his change right, and I said, well, I have to pay for more, pay for the school a little bit, you know? He really took that one. His father-in-law.
Does anybody have any other questions, comments, or recommendations about the superintendent's big five? Okay. Thank you, Cindy, that was the next thing on our agenda is the Envision 2030 Community Event Update.
So I'm still up. So, did everyone receive your invitation to Envision 2030?
Yes.
Yes, yay, okay.
I do have a question, Cindy, and that
Yes.
was in the email, it said, please feel free to forward this invitation.
Yes,
So does that mean that you just have that much space available that if other
right now we've got lots of space. Yes, so please feel free to forward that invitation. And please RSVP, because, because we may not have as much space as we think if people aren't answering.
Well, that's one thing question I had was, the whole best to engage the community that's not familiar with the program, to get them in there and get them to learn about it, get them educated on what they're doing. So I'm like, do I waste a seat? I know what it is. We're engaging our employees to get.
Bring a friend that knows nothing. And that's really why we wanted people to forward it, is because people are more likely to come if they get it from someone they know, rather than just from the district. So we would love for you to come and bring someone. So Envisioning the Future is our title. There's just a very broad overview of the agenda. And our opening session, we have Dr. Atkins and Marshall, and then Harlan Parrish from Fine Mark National Bank is also going to join them and talk about basically just education and why it's important for us to have good education in our communities. Then our breakout sessions each pair a person who may or may not be from the district. It might be a student, it might be a parent, it might be someone from the district with a community member. So we have the 4 areas. We're going to have 4 breakout sessions. Oh, forgot about our entertainment. We also have students coming for entertainment. And it is so cool. Dunbar Middle School is doing 3D printing, these little binoculars that say Envision on the side, and they have 2030 on the little things. They are so cute. So they're doing those, and they're going to set up and demonstrate how they do that out in the lobby. So that should be really, really fun. So here are, this is still in draft form. We have a couple of people that were still joining us. But if you've ever heard Mike Martin talk about how important pre-K education, early education is to success, I'm so excited that we have him with us. And then we have one of our Head Start specialists. And I started talking to her about how she was going to describe what she does and why she thinks it's important. And she said, but it's my son. It's my son that needs to talk. So she put her son on the phone. Oh my goodness. This high school student, Cape Coral High School, And he was like, well, I can tell him this and I can tell him this, and I'm so proud of the things I can do because of how I learned all this. But what you really need to know is how terrific my mother is. She came from Venezuela. She earned her doctorate in Venezuela. She came over here and she's had to work really hard. I mean, this kid is amazing. So I can't wait to hear him talk. So they're going to talk about the importance of pre-K. And then career and technical education, Gary's going to come up and talk, and he's bringing his chief HR officer, and he is working on getting me an employee. So I'm not sure who else is coming with him, but he's looking for someone who graduated from our schools to come and talk about how the experience of the academies helped with that. Student achievement, we are looking for one more person there as well. Mike Wukich from Lee Health. It has known about this Project Search for years, which was really exciting to me. Project Search is a program where it takes some of our challenged students and brings them into the hospital, and they rotate through departments and do like an internship in different departments. So it's really cool. And the theme of it is, helping every student reach his or her highest potential. So we want to talk about how that has helped some of our most challenged students become very contributing members of society. But then we also want to look at the other challenges, because students who are in some of our high-level programs like IB and ACE have different challenges. And so Mike's like, well, we have kids here. We have kids here that have graduated from those programs. I said, well, okay, so you find me one, because otherwise I have to go find a kid. so they are looking for an employee to talk about, so that we can look at how personal potential differs, but how the district really is working to meet the needs regardless of where those fall. And then for teacher retention, Robbie Repsdorf, she's going to address how important a good workforce is for any economy, and how retention, doesn't matter what organization it is important to keeping that going. And then we have 3 teachers, one who was Golden Apple last year, one who was our new teacher of the year last year, and one who was teacher of the year this year, one from each level. And they're basically going to do a real quick, here's who I am, here's what I love about teaching, here are the challenges. And then it's open to the audience for questions, because it's more of a teacher panel kind of thing there. So I think we have a really good slate of people there and of topics. So I'd love to get a full house. Well, actually, I'd love to get not too full a house, because I want it to be small enough groups of people, but I'd love to get about 100, 150 people to just really have time to have it be interactive and get some good ideas there.
So all of the committees,
Have been invited.
okay,
Yes.
DAX.
Yes.
I sent it out to our team, so.
Yeah.
We'll try and get a lot of our staff there.
Yeah, all the board advisory committees have been invited. We haven't gotten a lot of RSVPs. So, and I think that's because people don't tend to, and it's not an act, at least I couldn't get the link to work. So you have to actually copy and paste the link in. So that could be part of the problem, but we'll be prepared, but it'd be really nice to get RSVPs.
How about this Latanya Thomas?
She's our secretary.
She has her thing to just respond to her, so
You can respond to her
that
too,
just
that's
seems like an
fine.
easy way of doing it.
That's fine, that's fine.
Yeah, this is.
She's the one that's watching the other
He's on the
ones.
last week, so. yeah.
The other email actually goes to her as well,
Yeah, they want
Envision
the
2030
response by the
notice to her.
13th, which is a couple days from now.
that's, but we have to give a breakfast count a
Okay.
week ahead of time. And that's why we figure if we put the
Okay.
response 2 weeks ahead of time, we might get them all within a week.
I'll send it out to the Horizon Council exec.
Great, thank you. All right, any questions? I think that was the last one. Yep.
Okay, wow, we are moving right along. The next thing on the agenda is good of the order. I was told that we had new members tonight, but it doesn't look like they're
I
actually
think they're here.
So when they do come, hopefully at our next meeting in April, we will go around and introduce ourselves again. But I recognize all your faces, none of you are new.
Well, they were just approved last night, so maybe they just didn't understand that they could attend tonight, so it's okay.
And so our next meeting is April 15th. And then the meeting after that will be May 13th, and then that brings us to the end of Ooh, you're hard to believe.
So get your taxes done before our next meeting.
Yes.
The cynical part of me says, how many have I missed so far?
Hey.
If you hit the threshold, she's good with those emails. Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Okay, so, yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
Cindy, for
Thank
the
you.
update. And can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn?
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Get ready.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you being here tonight.
Nice job, thanks.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
I even learned stuff.